Good evening and welcome to the DPX. I'm Larry Vogel and I will be your host tonight. Alright, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Most everybody's here who signed up. There'll be a few other people I think drop in. So welcome to the September 14th DPX meeting online. I'll do a couple of little announcements. So for most of you who have been coming for a while know, so we do the regular DPX meeting every second Thursday, and then on the last Thursday we started the DPX AI group. And so if you're interested in doing some AI work, not only in Photoshop, because there's quite a few people who come who are also working like with Midjourney and some other programs, might be interesting to you. So we meet then on the last Thursday every month. So this month it'll be September 28th. And if you can't get enough of us by coming to 2 DPX meetings, every Monday morning we do the Photoshop on the Fly hour or so. I should change that, to the Photoshop on the Fly hour or so. It always goes over an hour. Every Monday morning. This kind of started back in COVID when we first had the COVID. We did it actually every day for about a year. But now we're on every Monday morning at 10 a.m. And you can send in files or just show up with some Photoshop questions. It's a little bit different than what we do here. This is more geared towards doing the critique nights, and we do get through all of the images that are sent in for the night. Sometimes in the Monday morning we might spend an hour or more looking at one image and talking about a lot of different techniques and things. So it's a little bit different, not a full-on critique. Also, Photoshop on the Fly service that I have that I can help people do online. So it's a share my screen just like we're doing now. And so the promo is if you have $1, I have a minute. So it's $1 a minute, $60 for the hour. And I also record it, so you will get a recording of our online session. So if I can help you troubleshoot some Photoshop problems. A lot of people will also use it to have me help them go through and look at images before they submit them for club competitions or whatever you're doing. Also, my YouTube channel, I brought this up just so that I could mention, also starting the last month with the DPX AI group, all of our meetings are recorded for both of the DPX groups, and I used to send out a link where you could go download the video. And so starting this month with this group, and also last month with the other group, I'm going to start posting them up on the YouTube channel, so you won't have to download them or have to go through all that hassle. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. Barbara actually thought of it now. We were just having a conversation and came up and said, hey, wouldn't that be cool to just put them up on YouTube? So anyhow, they'll be up. This meeting will be the first one that I'm going to go ahead and after we get it processed, it'll be up on the YouTube channel. I'll send out the link through the DPX announcements, and you'll get the link to go watch it at any time. And also the cool thing then is, so you don't have to download it, but you also could watch it on your phone or anywhere you are, whereas before you had to download it and you would have to have accessed it from your computer. So anyhow, they'll always be there. Somebody asked me, are you going to go back and start posting all the old ones? And I'm like, yeah, I got like, I don't know, is it 8 years worth of videos? I don't think I'm going to do that. So no. Just moving forward, from now on, they'll all be on the YouTube channel. And I think that's, oh no, there was one more announcement. The new Photoshop has, hopefully people have been aware of it. I think it just was today was the first release of it. The cool news now is some of the features that were only in the beta program are now inside Photoshop. So that means being able to do generative fill and other AI functions directly on your image through Photoshop. So if you haven't downloaded the new version yet, it's worth doing. I think there's a lot of really cool things happening with AI and Photoshop. And I think that's all the announcements I have. Does anybody have anything they want to share with the group before we move into looking at some images? You might be.
I can share.
Oh, okay,
something. Yeah. So the 2024 Sierra Club wall calendar is out, and I have a photo from the Great Smoky Mountains.
And as usual, Ann Collins has a photo.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
That's great.
And they've already made their selections for the 2025 calendars.
Wow.
I have one in the engagement calendar.
Very good.
Excellent.
Wow.
Congratulations again.
Yeah, those are usually great calendars. They're really well produced and definitely worth
Yeah,
getting.
they do a good job.
Okay.
Super.
And I could give you another piece of news.
Okay.
It's supposedly a sure thing, but we'll see. I don't know.
Okay.
There's this. If you're familiar with Nature Photographers Network, NPN, it's an online group. They recently started a magazine. It's quarterly, called Nature Visions Magazine, and their fall issue should be coming out soon. And in the winter issue, I will have an article and photos from my Colorado Rockies trip.
Oh, nice.
Fantastic, Anne.
So, Anne, do you have a link to that their site? And if you do, you can stick it in the chat, and then people could copy it from there.
Possibly.
Okay.
That's kind of technical for me to do.
Oh, really? So, yeah, if you have the copy of a link to their website, you can just copy it, and then the chat is just in that panel at the top where the two little bubbles are, and you can just go in there and click on it and paste it in there if you have it. Otherwise, you can send it to me, and I'll put it out with the video. When we put out the video, I can do it that way too.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
All right. And there's Don Lyons. Everybody was asking where's Don Lyons.
Oh, Don.
There he is.
Hey.
All right.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Well, thank you very much. I was talking to Hunter Biden and giving him a little advice on gun control.
Uh-huh.
God bless you.
And self-control. All right.
Self-control.
All right. Let's see. I think there was one other person. I don't see Barbara Altivers yet. She sent in some images, so hopefully she'll jump in before the night gets going.
Okay.
All right, so thanks, Anne. Any other announcements from anybody they want to share with the group? Otherwise, we'll move on. Anything big? All right. Who's this at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a no name at the bottom there. I don't know who that is. Oh, there we are. Chris Main.
Hi, Chris.
Welcome, Chris. We haven't seen or haven't heard Chris in a while, so thanks for jumping in tonight, Chris.
Okay.
And
I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to this.
excellent. And Judy jumped out and back, so we'll see. Yeah. All right. So,
I jumped back in. The other meeting's over.
oh, okay, excellent.
So I signed in with my iPad.
All right.
So I'm all yours now.
Okay. So, I'm trying to look at the names here. So the way this works is everybody can send in images, and it's kind of typically it's limited to sending in 3 images. Sometimes a few people have sent in 4, knowing that some nights we've had sort of a smaller group. And if you haven't sent in any images and you're curious, usually on the announcement that goes out, there's a couple of links in that announcement. One of them will take you to the page on the DPX site where it'll tell you about how to prep your files and how to send them. So if you're not familiar with that, you can look for that on the link. It's a little bit, I don't know why. So if I'll go here just to show you. On the Meetup site, years ago, they changed a little bit. I need to make this a little larger here. They changed a little bit, and the weird thing is, they on these tabs down here, there used to be a tab that actually said there were these message boards, and so that's where it's actually posted. So if you get the link, this is where it'll take you. If you want to look through the tabs, you can find it here. So there's detailed information for the GoToMeeting service, but here's the submission guidelines for the meetings. So if anybody has anything they want to share with the group, you can post it in here, or you can send it to me and I'll post it there. But yeah, that's where the information is at for that. And that link, like I said, is usually in the monthly announcements. So somebody had asked about that before. And if you go to the home page and you go to the meeting that's scheduled for the month, there's a few links in here. So one of them is the one to RSVP, so that'll get you to the home page on the meetup page. The next one down is the link to send the, let's see, that's for the, this takes you to the message board to get the information about it. And then the last one down here is the link that join the meeting. So, oh, and don't forget, the very bottom one here is the link where if you want to support DPX, meetings are all free, membership is free, but there's a little button here where you can do a donation to DPX through that button too. All right. So I was still looking to see, there's one, hopefully, Barbara Altivers. Is Barbara here yet? Oops, I don't see her. Come on. There's Osea. And there's the not Heidi Gotro button, I know that. That's Adrian.
Good call, yes.
Adrian is house sitting and cat sitting for Heidi. She pops in on Monday morning with that, and I go, okay, it's either Heidi or Adrian. Who's it going to be? Welcome, Adrian. Or Adrian. I got confused again by looking at the name. Welcome, Osea. So, all right. So when I get the files, they come in. I put them in the order that I get the files in, and Paul Lawrence is. I've forever always been first. Interesting is that the last minute I did get an email from Paul Lawrence saying that he was sick today, but he gave, well, I usually don't like reviewing images when people aren't here, because sometimes if we have questions, then it's, you know, they're not here to answer the questions. But he said, you can go ahead and review mine, and then I'll listen to the comments on my on the video when you put it out. So since he's looks like he has pretty much decided he's not going to be here tonight. So I'll go ahead and show his images. And if anybody's familiar, again, you can send in even if it says 3 images, you can send in your original image to go along with your final image. And one of the reasons why I bring this up too is because Paul Lawrence does, well, I guess he's showing either as, I don't know if it's his first or second image. So that's another great reason if he's here. This one has a bunch of like noise in it, and this one has been removed. But you can tell by looking at Paul Lawrence's images, they probably didn't come out of the camera like this. And so sometimes it's kind of helpful to see the before image. I don't think he sent the before image on this one, but I think he did on a couple of the other ones. So cool. I'll just open this up if anybody has any comments. Again, I'm assuming there's the one with the noise. I don't know if that's the one he intended to show you added noise. You never know with Paul. And then here's one with no noise. So any comments from anybody about for Paul? I got to get a little recording of crickets or something.
I think it's cool.
Yep.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, Paul never does anything straight out of the camera, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Been looking at Paul's images for a long time. And as usual, I mean, sometimes I'll offer up comments too, but I've mentioned this before. I think Paul's images are kind of the harder images to offer comments to, because there's really no kind of, you know, straight technique here to say, well, maybe you need a little burning or dodging or, you know, typical things like that. I think because his images are kind of so out there. But they're always, I think, interesting to see. They're very creative. Here's an example of his, I'm guessing, a before and after. So the before is the one on the left. So this is an example of how much he's altered this image. And typically, I know he uses a lot of the topaz filters. And when I say the topaz filters, I mean like the earlier ones that were in the old studio version, the painterly ones. And so I'm assuming that's what he's used here. And I will say that, you know, there is that technique now that we can use inside Photoshop where we can turn a photograph into a painterly thing using AI techniques to do that too. So I'm not sure. I know he was doing some of that too. So I don't know if this was actually with the topaz filters or if he used the AI function inside Photoshop. And I'm gonna jump out. Any comments about this one for Paul? Love it, hate it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I like what he did with it. I do, of course, have trouble with the subjects because they're, merged together, and it's kind of hard to tell what's going on.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. Is when I saw this one first, I thought, oh, having them merged together makes it kind of difficult, and then once it's been changed, it makes it maybe even a little more difficult. But I'd wondered if this back surfer wasn't here in the surfboard, because you can't see this guy's surfboard, it's all kind of lost in the whitewater, if I would still get the idea that this is a surfing photograph because of how much it has been changed. It's interesting, there was a little tip of the board there, but
it actually makes him look like a mermaid or a merman.
Merman.
Merman, yes.
Interesting, yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's got a tail and everything.
Yeah, hard to tell. I was going to mention, so I have the, let me think here. Actually, I think my other Photoshop is closed. So I did mention when we first started up that the newest version of Photoshop now has generative AI built into it. So again, if you make any kind of a selection, so like in this case, if I did a select all on the image and then asked it to do generative fill. So if you haven't been playing with it in the beta version, the thing that you'll see, there's this contextual taskbar. And if you don't have it open, you would look under Windows, and down at the bottom down here is the contextual taskbar. The one cool thing they did do, which I was hoping they would do, is generally, if I just said reset bar position, this bar normally appears wherever you make a selection. So if I took that selection away and say grab the marquee tool, made a selection up here, the bar just keeps popping around wherever you make a selection at. And so it's a real pain. And so the one thing you can do is you could, these three dots here, you could say pin the taskbar. So you can pin it here at the bottom, you can pin it anywhere. So I like putting it up here, up and out of the way. And the way that it was functioning inside the beta version, when you said pin the taskbar, it wasn't a sticky function in that if you turned Photoshop off and then reopened it, the contextual taskbar would be back on the run again. So each time you opened it, you had to drag it up here and pin it. So now in the new version of Photoshop, it is a sticky move. So as soon as you put it there, it should remember it the next time you open Photoshop, and it will be wherever you left it, as long as you did this pin the bar position. So the one thing I was going to mention was this idea of, if you select the entire image and you wanted to use generative fill, and you were up here now is where we can put in a prompt. And if I just said oil painting, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this maybe already. So if I say oil painting and then I hit generate, it's going to use artificial intelligence to create an oil painting. And what you're watching, the slow part of this, is that it's actually sending it up through the cloud to Adobe to use their processing machine, and then comes back to us. Takes about maybe 15 seconds or 20 seconds or so. But so this is what happens if you just make a general selection and tell it to do an oil painting. It disregards the content of your photograph. And every time you do a generative fill, over here on the right inside the properties panel, you'll get 3 variations of it. All 3 of these are just blobs of paint. So so there was an interesting technique, again, that somebody came up with, and this is the thing I've been excited about, this possibility of what can happen, is as more and more creative people start to jump into using these functions, we're going to find people that are coming up with some interesting ideas. So the one here was to use this quick mask, going into quick mask mode, and then bringing up a curves menu. And for whatever reason, my shortcut for my curves menu doesn't want to work, so I will do it from here. So, and this is not a curves adjustment layer. It's just a curve that's going to affect the quick mask mode. And so by dropping the side of the menu, you'll see that instead of it overriding, or instead of the generative fill taken over the entire image, you can start to lower this opacity. So then some of the pixels from the original image come through, and this is always a guessing game. So that's at 50%. Once I have that lowered to 50%, I can turn off the quick mask mode. Oops, wrong one. Let me go back here again. So I want to go to the quick mask mode and jump out of there. So I still have an active selection, and I've still used that curve to drop it down to that 50%. So now when I come up to generative fill and I type in oil paint and say generate, it should, and there's no guarantee, but it should do a better job of trying to grab the image, the original image, and use those pixels along with the painting technique to make something that looks maybe a little closer to the original image, but as an oil painting. And you can play with that adjustment level. So there you go, nothing like it. So we'll do it again. Let me go back here. So we'll go back here a notch, and I will ask it to, we'll go actually a little bit lower. But so actually what I'm going to do is, I keep hitting the wrong button here, is to show you this new function that, so if you're familiar, and you'll see these panels I have open here, these are the Tony Kuiper's TK, this is TK8, there's a new version out, I've got it downloaded, but I haven't installed it yet. So this is the older panel. And the way that this works is you can use this for creating luminosity masks. Now, the cool thing is, recently, if you've watched any of the Dave Kelly videos, he does a thing every Friday called TK Friday, and he usually demonstrates something using, processes an image using the TK panels. And so the great YouTube videos, if you want to look Dave Kelly up and check out his every Friday TK panel. Now, he's been playing around with this painterly technique, and he got together with Tony, and they created this TK generative fill panel. And the good news is it's free. You can just go to the, if you actually just typed in TK generative fill panel, it would take you to Tony Kuiper's site, and you can download this panel and you can install it, and there's directions on how to install it. So the way this one works is that you can use any, so this is, instead of using that curve adjustment and loading in the quick mask panel, you can do this in 5% increments. So if I'm going to just drop this down to say the 5% mode here. And what that does is, as soon as I click on it, it's already made an active selection, and it's actually hidden the selection so you don't see the marching ants, but this little rainbow pattern around the edge indicates that I have an active selection. I have it set for the 5%. I can go straight here to the prompt, so I won't even need the contextual taskbar. I could use this panel completely to do the same function. So if I go oil paint from here, and I just say generate from here. Now, this is the lowest value available. So again, you never know. And sometimes this has to do with resolution, and there's a lot of different factors here of how these things function. But anyhow, this new TK panel can be kind of a little quicker and easier way to do these things. So there you see. So at 5%, we still have quite a bit of the image showing, and the painterly technique is much less, rather than doing just the paint blobs. And so you could pick, so it'd be interesting to see. I've done this before where it didn't seem to really match up with the if I did the 50% fill using the curve adjustment, it didn't seem to be exactly the same. But so at the 25%, I'll go oil paint and just say generate again. And so you can see how much quicker this is. You don't have to keep doing the curve adjustment. You don't have to keep going to quick mask. It just automatically generates a new layer. This first one was at 5%, so you could type that in there if you wanted to. And then this one here is going to be at 25%. So very quick and easy to use. There you go. So that's a much stronger painterly effect, right? It almost lost the image. So we would need to be somewhere between this 25 and 5%. So the cool thing is you don't have to keep typing in the same command. Otherwise, on the contextual panel, you would have to copy it, or you have to keep typing it in every time. So there's other functions on here too. So you can create copy, so one at 1024 pixels, which is the function that it works with. Also, oh, there's Barbara.
I'm here.
Hi, Barb.
Interesting. So anyhow, you get the idea. This is what the panel is. So it's weird that between 5 and 15%, that's still quite a huge jump if I look at the first panel. But anyhow, it's worth. I think this is worth playing with. Oh, how am I going to go? I got
I
Barbara.
think the AI was having as much trouble as we were in identifying the subject.
That could be. So yeah, but anyhow, there's a bunch of things you can do in here too. One, I mean, I could change the prompt from here. I can feather the selection from here. You can actually also cycle through the adjustments. Oops, I have it turned off. So there we go. So you can actually cycle through the panel from here. Each of the properties, so you don't have to go all the way up there to do those. You can rasterize the layer, which means you'll lose all of those variations. It just actually condenses it down to an image. You can trash it, download. So there's a bunch of things you can do from here, and there's a whole guideline that you can get off of his website. So if you're interested in playing with that technique, you can also use this to generate selections and use the same those same percentages to fill your selections to do that with. So I knew Paul, even without Paul being here, I knew we would have something to talk about. So anyhow, so that's his original. There's the painterly one. I'm assuming this is a topaz. His next one, and he does a lot of these where these camera blur and overexposure in camera things where things are by maybe first glance overexposed. I don't know if he's done anything other than just the long exposure here to start with. It kind of looks like that's all it was. And then this has been cropped, and I'm assuming maybe not the painterly technique. It looks like the background. Yeah, no, because all of these patterns in the red area back here look pretty close to the same. So I don't know that. Looks like he's just boosted the saturation maybe, or posterized it a bit. So any comments here for Paul on this one? Let me rearrange that. There we go. Before, after. That sort of electric pink between the two of these. It's interesting. It's really there. But I think I'd take that down a bit or eliminate it. All right. Any other comments for Paul? Otherwise,
Get well, Paul.
get well, Paul. All right.
Oh, nice.
Let me back out of here. And Barbara Altivers is not here tonight also.
Oh.
Did you see her? Oh, there she is. She is here. Yeah. Somehow
A little late myself.
somehow also your square there, like everybody else's, has initials on it. I don't see. There's nothing on yours, so that's why I got lost. I didn't see your.
And mine actually shows Barbara Altivere's on there, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Oh, really? I see down in the lower corner, but doesn't have the BA. But all right, she's here. Yay!
Wow.
So Barbara Altivers, for those of you that don't know, is the black and white queen of digital photography in our neighborhood. So tell us about these, Barbara.
This is here at my house. The mountains are on one side, and we get God rays a lot.
Wow.
This one was phenomenal, but
Wow.
we get them at least once a week, if not more often. And I just love the way that light was hitting the hills.
So when she says her house, you're saying they're in Arizona, and you're just about north of where? South?
South of Sedona.
Sedona. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Very cool. Any comments for
That's
Barbara?
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Barbara. I
Thank
love
you.
it.
Yeah, I didn't have any suggestions. I mean, the typical one that I almost always like at least looking at, and sometimes I assume that it may have already been done, but that that action to do the mid-tone contrast. And so, like in this case, this is a flattened JPEG, but so in order to actually run the action, you have to have two layers, because part of the action is to do a well, was it Control-Alt-Shift-E to do a composite of all of your layers. So if you had a bunch of adjustment layers, it would do a composite layer on the top. Now, here's another cool thing if you're not familiar with the Tony Kuiper panel also. So these are just, you know, the regular action panel inside Photoshop. And the cool thing about the Tony Kuiper panel is that there is, and this I just have it here as a fly-out menu, but you could also pin it open if you wanted to. And these are the TK8, or in this case now a new one, TK9, the My Actions panel, where you can actually extract out of all of your actions inside Photoshop. You can extract the ones that you use most often, and then through this little side panel, you can run them directly from here. So this JPC mid-tone contrast is the one that I use a lot, and so just clicking there would run the action. And the way this works is it's a so again, it's that composite layer. It's using the high pass filter and in the overlay mode, and then it drops in at 50%. And I've shown this many times. The other function that it does is the blend if function. So if I double click here, the way that the action is written is to remove the contrast from the shadows and the high values, because that's the function you'd normally get from the high pass filter and overlay mode. It would add contrast everywhere. And so many years ago, Mac Holbert came up with this idea, and this one is a John Paul Caponegro version of it. It's just a little more aggressive than the Mac Holbert one. But so using the blend if, you blend the contrast out of the shadows and out of the high values, and looking at the numbers here, it would say it's going to add contrast between the value of 45 and 215, and then that way you don't get the shadows blocked up or the highlights blown out. So it controls that mid-tone contrast. So it comes in at 50%, so you can dial it up or down. Dialing it up, you may end up getting some halos, so you have to be careful of that. But if I turn that off and on, you can see the effect in the sky. Hopefully it comes through on the video. It should, because it's pretty dramatic at 50%. But you can, there was actually, I thought I was getting some halos here, but these are actually already sort of dark edges on those clouds. It does exaggerate them. But the other thing with all of these is, or with this, is it comes with a mask, so you can also paint in or paint out areas where you want it to appear. And you can also do it in terms of, you know, strength. If you want it to be stronger in one area and not as strong in another area, you could paint in or out those values. And like I said, you can always raise this up or down. And then this mid-tone action also works really well, equally as well, on color images too. So I don't know, after doing it, I mean, it's always that thing about, you know, with black and white, more contrast is usually more drama. Again, as long as you don't blow out high values. In some way it exaggerates.
I like the effect of the action on the bottom of the picture. Without the action, it really doesn't have detail and, you know, and the tonal range.
Yeah.
It's like no highs and lows. But with the action, the bottom of the picture is greatly improved.
Yeah, so you can see.
I agree. I think that helps down there a lot.
Again, so I mean, I could do, so again, I'm going to use some of the, so this TK8 combo panel is a bunch of shortcuts, and so I can do the sky selection right from here, and so just as well as going into select and select sky. But so I can do the sky selection here, and it will generate that. I'm just, usually my way is I go, let's just delete the white mask that's there, add a new mask with the selection made, and in this case, that's interesting. Why? Oh, I see. It's weird that it didn't include that upper area in the mask. I've never seen that before. Oops. Let me undo that. White. Yeah. This could also, I mean, I could also use some contrast to blow that out. But so in this case, like what Fred's saying, he thought that it would look better on, more stronger here. So if I invert the mask, then it's only going to appear on the bottom of the image. And so now if I turn this off and on, it does increase the contrast there. And one of my favorite techniques then is to, in the properties panel, take that mask and drop the density of the mask. So if we're looking at the mask, this is what happens. As we drop the density, the mask starts, the blacks start to gray out, right? So at about this point, I'm getting 100% of the effect down here where the mask is white, and I'm now getting 50% of the effect up here. Of course, you want to do it while you're looking at the image, and so it's a little more subtle. So you can play with this adjustment here. And the great thing about this too is then it's non-destructive. So you could you could play with that adjustment. So you get a subtle adjustment here and a much stronger effect here. And I agree. I think that looks pretty good. Any other comments for Barbara on this image?
It looks to me like it's causing a little bit of haloing on the top of the mountain. That may be how the clouds actually were, but
it is bright. This is already here, right? So it may be. I thought it was adding a darker edge around these upper clouds too, but it's already there too. So it can cause an effect of. It's interesting. My mask got all messed up. But it can cause that effect of haloing. You have to be careful, and then at that point you could, drop the opacity of it a little bit.
yeah, I mean, I love what it's doing with the mountains and stuff. My only other thing would be border control at the top.
So
I don't like to see light edge.
lighter up here.
No, the light is right in the middle at the top edge.
Oh, across this edge here.
Yeah,
Okay. So you're saying
Yeah.
darken some of that.
that's easy to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, the clouds. But it's a beautiful picture.
So Barbara, did you? I mean, you already said that the God rays are happening weekly in the neighborhood. Did you have to do anything, or did you do anything in here to help exaggerate that a little bit?
Not with this one.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, great skies. Jeez.
Yeah.
Everybody who lives in
Beautiful.
California is extremely jealous. We always
The
got
skies here are just incredible.
Yeah,
the sunset today was just
we just get boring skies here most of the time. All right.
Really lovely.
Let's see if that's saved. Yeah. All right, and your next one here.
that is outside of Flagstaff.
And was it recent? I mean, did you have snow there recently?
No, this was when we were there March.
Okay. Wow, still March snow.
Yeah, Flagstaff got snow constantly through March, and when it all melted out, we knew it down here. It came down in all the rivers.
Yeah. Wow. Did you have any problems with flooding or anything, or was it pretty well?
They had some flooding. We didn't here. But yeah, they definitely. We had gone to shoot at the river one day, and about a week later, all this happened, and we went back over there, and the edge of the river had gone completely up. There was sand everywhere,
Wow.
places that wasn't any. But yeah, it was really phenomenal.
Wow. All right. Any comments or help for Barbara here on this image? Everybody's going to be.
I like this one, but it feels like there's something missing.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to have
What is, Larry, what is the value of the snow in the bottom right?
in the bottom right here. Yeah, so interesting. I'd have to open it up and see, but that was an interesting thing that I had. And this is something, we talked about this before, that when you photograph snow, essentially, in the shade or on overcast days, it's sometimes hard to get that texture to show up. It sometimes comes up pretty flat. I don't think any of this is even close to blown out. I think this is actually probably brighter back here. But so I looked at the idea before about, so how, are there things like adding noise can sometimes look like the snow has texture and things like that. But I actually, I'll just go to the next image. So I actually was able, and this is on a JPEG, was actually able to add a lot more texture to the snow here. And I'll show you, another interesting technique, and I've done this before on some of my own images, when, we'll just call it, depth of field issues. So if we look at this corner here, and again, if you just isolate the corner, it might start to look a little flat here. But you could easily go in and add a little more contrast here, or paint out the effect. So what I ended up really doing is, this was really all done inside of Camera Raw. So if I turn that off, that's sort of the before, and this is the after, which means if you went back to the original 16-bit RAW file, and all I did was I decided that I knew I was going to have to mask this because I knew it would mess up everything else. But inside of Camera Raw, I went in here, so texture, clarity, and dehaze, those are the three things that sometimes will help add texture and detail to areas that are either flat or lacking that detail. But you can see how much it screws up the rest of the image, right? So I already knew I was going to do it selectively. So if I just turn this off and on, you know, that's sort of the before and after of that snow. And again, I mentioned, I mean, this is a JPEG, right? So I think if you went back to the original RAW file, you'd probably be able to even get a little bit more texture that wouldn't look so bad. So and those are the only adjustments I did. We're just using texture, clarity, and dehaze. And then brought them back into Photoshop and put a mask on them. And I did use a luminosity mask that I also sort of adjusted so that I had some control here. So this is a luminosity mask. I don't remember which one I used, but it's a lights mask. And so that mask helped control, you know, again, most of this back here has a problem. So this is that, or a problem in the mask. This is that technique of doing the mask. So this is the mask that's on the image layer that went through Camera Raw. And then that group, that was put into a group. And then the mask that I used here was to paint out everywhere else except for that front snowbank. So that's the mask technique. Now I could have easily just gone in and painted everything out on this mask, but if you make a mistake, then it's hard to kind of go back. So I like the idea of working with this two mask technique, and it's basically just putting this image layer or even an adjustment layer into another group and then adding a mask to the group. So in this case, probably added a black mask, and then and I think I even maybe made a selection. Let me see. I didn't feather it, so I probably painted it to get that foreground. Now, the second half of this, though, was, and I think this is a depth of field issue, where a little bit of this snowbank looks a little kind of softer, out of focus on the edge. And so what I ended up doing, I did it all on a secondary layer, especially just so I can show you how it's done, but also because this next layer down is a smart object layer, so that this Camera Raw filter is a smart filter, and which means I can double click and go back into Camera Raw and change the adjustments on that particular layer, and I can't retouch directly on here. So I wanted to be able to see the effect, so I put a new empty layer above that, and then I made a selection where I just kind of drew a shape across there. So you can kind of see if I turn this off and on, it doesn't really follow the original shape, but some of it does, some of it doesn't. But I followed that shape across there with a selection, and then I inverted the selection and cloned information up against that edge. So it gives the illusion that this edge is sharp because the selection that I made was sharp. And I might have feathered it by maybe 0.5 on the pixels, and so this clone adjustment then just creates this barrier that looks sharp. I mean, that's the whole idea behind it, is it's out of focus, it's soft, but the selection gives you an edge that now looks sharp, and so that's the way that was done. And then there were a couple of weird areas where I thought needed, like over here on the edge here, so I did a generative fill over on this other edge just to kind of smooth out that kind of weird snow that was there. And again, I left the three variations there. It was weird, some of them even added more. That one's not too bad. So it was actually just the first one that kind of added more highlights that were more distracting. But that's the thing with the generative fill, you can keep generating from that selection. So there's the mask, that was the selection that I had made, and then it filled that space with generative fill. So that's...
I like that technique of cloning against the edge.
Yeah.
Me too.
That was very creative.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where I can say, you know, that we've all had this problem, right? And I mean, that's the way I came up with it years ago, was like, wow, this just needs to have something done to it so it doesn't look that soft. I don't know, and I didn't go into doing it, but it also feels like there's a weird area right here that kind of on this one snowbank here that kind of drops out of focus here for some reason. So I don't know if you go back and look at that. Do you know, did you do any kind of retouching there? Or?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
But I could basically do the same thing.
Because if I look at, like this here has lots of sharpness to it, and then it kind of slowly drops out here, and then it kind of comes back again. And it looks good all the way across. So, yeah,
sure.
I would wonder. Yeah, I like the image. I like the idea of the crop. I think it works really great as a black and white.
I like the texture that you added very, very much. Before you put the mask on the group 1 layer, the shadow that's in the lower quarter of the picture, could you just paint that to be 50% on the mask so that that medium gray
this area in here
has more contrast?
The area on the right side?
No, to your left and above, the shadow of the branches.
This area right in here.
Yeah, could you just change your group 1 mask to paint just 50% on just on the shadow?
So it's not going to do, like, that's with the turned off completely, so it doesn't do, oh, I know why, because that generative fill is what's doing that over there. So I'd probably have to just do a a mask or a adjustment layer. So if I just
yeah, I like the shadows to have a little more contrast.
Oh, a little more contrast. So if I take some brightness up and some darkness down, like that, just this area here, I'll paint it in or paint it out.
Yeah, I would possibly go a little more.
A little more bright.
Well, I'm trying to get that gray to be darker, actually.
Oh.
Without affecting anything else. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Oh, you could.
All right. So,
it gives it more dimension.
So if I invert that and then brush this in, I need a better brush than that.
Yeah, more feeling of dimension.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Oops. Let me get a softer brush here.
Fred, are you talking about the gray areas being darker?
Oops.
Yeah, the gray shadows of the branches overhead.
Oh, okay.
It adds another tone to the picture.
It actually brightens it up more, but it should have a little more contrast even. But there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Something like that. All right, I'll buy that. I would have to just go ahead.
You could select that.
Yeah.
Select that tone and burn that in.
Yeah.
Simply.
Okay. Ready?
Go ahead.
So I would clone out the footprints in the foreground on the right and on the top of that snow mound. And the trees there are so dark, and I would like to see them quite a bit brighter, since the snow in that area is brighter, so there must have been light. And I think the brightness could go into the needles too.
I don't actually see any footprints.
On the right side?
Yeah.
It's just where the snow's broken down. I don't think it's really footprints. It's just...
Yeah.
It looks like somebody walked up and then across to the left.
Huh. All right, and then what did you say the last one about the darkness of these trees?
Yeah, I would brighten them up so a little more detail in the needles and the trunk.
All right. Yeah, this does. It's a little weighty there, but it's kind of a Barbara Altiver's thing, isn't it?
No, I keep trying to get her to change.
Oh, do you? Yeah, so it's mostly on the bottom end. So again, this is kind of the cool thing about the if you're using luminosity masking. So if you're not familiar with it, so on the Tony Kuiper panel, when you open up the luminosity section, you can go to the shadow side. So remember, a mask would allow you to lighten the values that are white, and it'll hold back the values that are dark. And so you can work your way down. So each one of these is a stop darker. And so it starts to really kind of pinpoint the tones that you want to affect. I think that looks about right. And now on any of these, I could output these. I could output this as a mask on. In this case, I'll do a curve adjustment layer. And so on the curve adjustment layer, now that mask is there. So that's cool. Quick, easy way to get a luminosity mask onto an adjustment layer. And I could just use a curve adjustment, or if I want to, again on this little panel here, I can say, oh well, let's just go ahead and drop in a screen blend mode, and that'll brighten things up. And if that's not enough, I could always go ahead and open it up a little bit more. And if you want to, again, limit the effect. So if I look at this image and say, okay, I kind of like what it's doing everywhere, but I would maybe want to also then go back in and add some mid-tone contrast, because a lot of this kind of got flattened out. And so I might want to do it. Let me see what that mask looks like again. So yeah, it's not really having that great of effect. So another way to do this, so if I put this back to a normal blend mode and then look at the curve adjustment and reset this curve adjustment, you can see on the histogram inside the curve, you know, this is only showing the pixels that are showing through the mask. So everything is way over to the left there. And many times with that kind of a mask, with this kind of mask here, you can see it's not going to affect the snow at all. With that kind of a mask there, you can a lot of times go ahead and grab the curve adjustment, and sometimes I'll start by grabbing the highlight side of this thing and just start pulling it to the left. I mean, at some point it's going to flatten everything out, but you can see how far you can push that, where you'll start to get a little more, it'll still get bright, but you'll also start getting a little more contrast in the image. And so there's sort of a before and after there, which actually works pretty good. And there's a bunch of other ways to do it. You know, inside of the Kuiper panel also, there's a panel for doing color grading. And just like you see inside of Camera Raw and Lightroom, the color grading panel, so that's integrated in here. And you can also make adjustments then to shadows, midtones, and high values. So if I wanted to here, even without a mask, I could just say, let's take this and I want to brighten up the shadows. See, it's going to flatten out real quick. So the mask is probably going to give me a better option than this. But anyhow, this is a great way too of being able to color grade. We don't have any color in this image, but you can still adjust shadows, midtones, and high values here. So maybe let me go back here. Let me reset that. I was wondering again if I use that same mask. So I'll just copy it and put it up there. I don't know why my thing does this now. It's like when I drag it up there, you don't see it right away. So now if I put that same mask on there and do the same effect here, let me see if I grab the, let me try the midtones. Well, I can push that pretty hard. And maybe even incorporate the two of those together. This one would need to be as strong. But yeah, I'm not going to play with it to do everything, but there's a lot of ways to affect that mid-tone contrast. And then again, same thing like we did before, I could run that action for the mid-tone contrast, and then also, you know, paint it in wherever I want that effect to show through. Yeah, that actually, you can see that helps the top part of the image a lot. So again, on this, another great way to do this would be, again, once I've done that, I can go into the luminosity masking, and in this case create a highlight mask. Eventually, maybe somewhere in there, I'm going to adjust the actual mask. I want to pull these probably I would still have to paint this thing out. So in the end, you can actually invert this highlight mask because we want to protect the shadows, and then I could add that mask to that same layer, and now it's only going to affect the midtones in the image because that mask is blocking it out of the snow areas. Yeah. All right, so there's only 50 things for you to do on that one, Barb. No, I think those are all great suggestions. You know, I was talking about this the other day. I think my barber and I were talking about this idea that sometimes when you when you're doing critiques and an image, it's a really great image, and then you start throwing in, you know, like little what are going to be maybe looked at as like picky things to change in it. It's like that's just how good the image is that we have to get down now to the little small details and say maybe by affecting this area or that area, it would maybe improve the image. Maybe sometimes those subtle things can be the big thing. I loved this one.
I took this a long time ago, probably 2 or 3 cameras ago.
Life by the camera.
And saw it again and went, I really need to do something with this. I really like the shadows and the reflections and all the things in the glass are just really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the glass that just kind of go totally abstract. I mean, you kind of get an impression of a stairway here, but then this sort of marbleizing in the glass is pretty cool. What's the building? Do you remember?
It is on the gorge between Idaho, Washington, and Oregon.
Oh.
There's a building along the side that you can view from one of the turnout places, and this building is there.
Wow. Very cool.
It's a very cool image.
Thank you. I wasn't too sure. It's been so long but I really like the way it turned out.
So again, the only thing we'll harp on this mid-tone contrast thing to death. The only thing that and the only place I think it maybe needs it is in the glass area. Everything else looks pretty good, so it'd be interesting just to see what that would do. So here,
I like the picture very much. I just have one small suggestion.
All right.
The upper left, because it's lighter, gives the impression, right? Yeah, you got it.
at that edge here.
Gives the impression it wasn't square.
Yeah, I noticed
It was-
that. Everything, this is like these lines really are. It's just this weird kind of corner thing here.
It's the lighting.
Is it?
Yeah, the lighting creates an illusion.
Or I was wondering if it was even, because it seems to do it over here too. This corner seems to flare out. It might be an architectural, detail. Because it's weird that line that appears to be the corner really does
It's
sort of
kinda-
travel down here at an angle, but everything else is perfectly straight.
With the light, it could be the light.
Well, that would be the one thing too. Is some? I mean, again, if it's really there, that's one thing. If it's visually a problem, then yeah, maybe. So I would wonder, for like you're saying, even on those areas, if by doing a curve where you sort of flatten out those edges, and then mask that and paint it back in right here.
Or clone it down.
Oops, didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's better.
And now I would probably want to make this side match a little bit. And so I'm going to do that little shift click deal here. Too much. So,
Fern Elmore would crop it.
yeah, there you go. Hey, Vern's not here to.
Sure miss
Oops.
Fern.
I know.
Right? Jeez, I got too much of a. Too close to that edge.
And the left edge definitely has to come, the light has to come up on that.
Yeah.
But it's so not what I normally do, but I
Yeah, I love it though.
like.
There we go. Also, I wonder about light, going the opposite way and lighten up some of those other adjacent values. Yeah. So again,
I love seeing them walking in the clouds up the stairs.
well, that's a
That's, yeah. It's my story. I'm sticking to it.
So 30% with white. Yeah, that definitely helps. I think having them, it feels a little more even. I might play with that some more. But then running that mid-tone contrast and then doing it so that, I mean, the cool thing about this too is I've done it before in some of our meetings where I've doubled or tripled up on this mid-tone contrast. Because again, if it's only on the parts of the window, and this is also an image where you don't really get much halos because you're not up against the sky or any of those other tones. So yeah, it's weird that this seems, so this is interesting. I haven't really faced this before. I'm gonna go ahead and invert that and then take a brush with the white and start at 50% anyhow, and sort of brush some contrast into these. Those look just a little flat over here. So let's see. Yeah, I like that. Very cool image. I love all the detail in it.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot.
Comments from anybody else? Wow.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And, it's a great image.
Yeah. Once again, one of those, I love the examples of never ever put anything in the middle of the photograph unless it absolutely works.
That thought went through my mind, and I went, "There's no way you're going to do anything with this that isn't
Right.
centered."
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, I mean, I think when you think about it, you kind of go, okay, some things, buildings are especially a lot of times things that are built on symmetry for a reason, right? There's balance and symmetry, and then to get in something, you know, this tight where you really kind of focused in on an area, to then try to create a composition that breaks up the symmetry seems kind of weird, but also even in its symmetry, it's still sort of divided into thirds, you know, in a sense that there is that sort of thirds, and so sometimes you can get away with that, you know, having something in the middle. And however, most judges are not going to agree with you, so that you still have to deal with that, but whatever. So
I've pretty much given up on
yeah,
judges entirely. Thinking about pulling this out of it, all of it, because it's just mind-boggling.
well, I mentioned before, I don't know if I did to this group, but I've made my decision this year that I am no longer doing any judging anymore. In fact, I sent out
You're no longer what?
doing any judging for photo groups or anywhere. I have a whole diatribe that I send out in the email. But actually, I had 2 offers this morning to judge for 2 different groups, and I turned them down. But I don't just go no. I go no, but let me tell you why. And so I give them a whole thing about, I think the idea of the idea of competitive arts is always been a weird thing to me. I think as long as we're trying to help people make better photographs, I just don't know what the value is of assigning numbers, you know, like this is a 6, that's an 8, this is a 9, and then this gets first place, second place, third place. It feels so arbitrary, and in some ways a little disingenuous to try to think that has some sort of real value, where I think people learn more and become better photographers by the critique process. I mean, because anything anybody says you can decide to accept or reject. But even the other side of that is, and the thing that bothered me the most is that as soon as we start creating competitions, then we start creating rules, and those rules are telling people what they can and can't do to their photographs. And I'm like, who the hell are we to tell anybody what they can and can't do to their photograph? And I get it. You know, it's your club, it's your organization. You can come up with all the rules that you want. But I think many times those things become real stifling in terms of creativity, just because we have a.
I was just going to say, I think that's where I've gotten to. It's, you know, that I'm gearing things towards judging instead of towards my art.
And that's and interesting that you say it just like that. And that is, and I've mentioned it before on my Monday morning, there was one of the photographers who said that she belonged to a group up in Orange County, and that group became a little more restrictive on what you could and couldn't do to your photographs. And she found that when she was out photographing, this stuff was sort of playing in the back of her head, and she stopped and said, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like I'm really being supported creatively here. I'm being told what I can and can't do. And so she said, yeah, eventually I just decided to leave the club. And I hate to think that, you know, that would be the end result, is because I said, you know, I think the idea of doing juried shows, in the sense that we have to curate a show to figure out how many pieces we can put on the wall, and we curate the work to make the strongest statement possible. That's a little different than giving numbers and awards and ribbons to artists. And I think the idea of curating a show is perfectly fine, but yeah, it's a whole other game. But so anyhow, that was my diatribe. So
I agree with you 100%.
I knew Ann would, because we've had the discussion before about Ann does not participate in juried competitional shows.
Well, I was in clubs that did competitions, and I love the critiques, but I hated the competitiveness and the rules and the restrictions, and I got out.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I had made the comment, I mean, sort of a side line here now, is that I had made the comment, what would happen if we decided to turn San Diego Fair, Orange County Fair, into a curated show where we decide how many pieces of artwork we can hang, and that would be the job of the people, judges or whatever, to curate the show, select what they think is the strongest images to put the show together. And then you promote it as, hey, here's a 6 or 8 week show where thousands of people are going to come in to see your work. But there's no awards and there's no ribbons. And I already, you know, what do you think would happen? And I already answered my own question. I think the number of entries would go way down. Just listening to people talk, they love the ribbons, they love getting the awards and all that. So, you know, I think that's fine if that's what the way people decide. And I just have decided that I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So,
and I both. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barbara, for sharing.
I'm going to take off. My son's here, and I'm going to go visit with him.
Oh, well, thank you for letting us steal you away from him for a little bit here.
Yeah, I will watch the video when it comes back, and y'all have a good evening.
All right.
Thanks,
Barb.
and we know you will, as you live in that most wonderful place.
Go get some more God rays.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
All right, Mr. Fred Gutentag.
I've gone all the way back to nature. All my pictures tonight are nature, which I haven't done in a while. But I'm rediscovering old pictures that I had from years ago and redoing them.
Wow.
And so I'm just showing nature tonight.
Nice.
Very cool.
This picture was taken in San Diego Zoo.
Oh.
The bird and the perch were there, but the background is a stock photo. Texture background.
You can't do that.
It's beautiful, Fred.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got to.
We are not in that group, Larry.
I got to imagine, you know, again, what was really there was probably, you know, less visually appealing for sure. Yeah. I mean, most zoo photos are horrible, and I think this is a great example of how to make, you know, an image better. I mean, I'm all in favor.
The right wing was severely damaged.
Oh, really?
It had a big hole in it. Oh. And I just took part of the left wing and flipped it.
Nice.
Very cool.
Boy, you're doing all kinds of things you're not allowed to do.
I agree with you, Larry. I wouldn't, you know, want to be in a club where they restrict you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, a great example of, you know, whatever it takes to improve the image. And, you know, as opposed to the idea that you'd have to forfeit the image and go, well, you know, I can't do anything to it, so might as well delete it. So where here's an example where you make something better.
I should have put in the original because the background was like the most distracting background you can imagine.
Yeah.
All bright, blown out water.
All right.
So, hey, Fred, was this bird was injured and being attended to?
Yes,
or?
the right wing. The right wing had a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great job.
Yeah.
I like the way he's kind of looking at you. You've got the eye, the profile. It looks, the bottom part with the rock or whatever he's on and his tail feathers look like they were flashed. Used a strobe or something, so I would probably darken that a bit.
It was just strong sunlight.
Yeah.
And actually, in the original, it was nearly blown out.
Wow.
And I did try to add texture and tone, texture and tone to it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I see what Ann's saying. Just to try to do a quickie here, anyhow. Don't know how successful this quick selection is going to be, but we'll see. Of course, the feathers, which maybe wouldn't hurt having a little extra contrast, but anyhow, we'll see. So I'll just rework it from there. So if we try adding in a curve adjustment, I was also wondering too that for some reason too, it feels like it's a little, if I want to say, like it has a little bit of a green cast to it, where I also think based on these warm tones on the bird, I think it would be nice to see this even warmed up too. So the tough part, I mean, it's probably, I don't know if it needs to be any flatter, but it feels like it might just need a little more contrast, and actually it kind of feels like it might even need and then adding some red to this to warm it up. Wrong way. And it's not going to take a whole lot. It's amazing when you look at how much a little bit of a move on the, you know, each channel can really affect the color balance. And sometimes, again, this by just adding the red, but also maybe putting in a little bit of yellow, will keep it from looking so hot. Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, I don't like what it's doing to this feather because it didn't get masked out, but it might be a little strong.
I think it's good.
So a lot of times,
I like
a lot of times, what happens is, you know, these adjustments, trying to really fine tune them is not really easy. Where using the opacity of the layer is sometimes a little bit better way to really fine tune that. But I do like that.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I'm making it even darker, it kind of subdues it a little bit more. Yeah, I like that. Let's save that file. Yeah. Yeah, good suggestion, Ann. I think that does help.
Thank you.
Any other comments for Fred on this one?
I do like the image.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. The loving giraffes.
These giraffes are also from San Diego, and the background is actually a rock formation from Death Valley.
Wow. Well done.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, it feels pretty natural.
I love the way they are both looking in opposite directions. So the two of them, they have a 360-degree view of everything.
Right, back of the head, front side of the head. It was funny because it's you. When this one came up, I'm going, okay, that has to be two different giraffes that he's put together somehow. So it made me want to look a little bit harder at the image to see how it was maybe put together. I didn't even think about the background being the new part of the image. Very cool. Any comments for Fred on this one?
Fred, what did you use to mask the giraffes?
Did you say mask the giraffes?
No, what masking did you employ to separate the giraffes?
Oh, I just made a selection of the two giraffes. They're relatively easy to select.
Wasn't pen tool, really. Okay, just curious.
Yeah, boy, that would be a lot of work.
Oh yeah, it looks great though. Wow.
It does feel like there's a little bit of, I mean, this is always the hardest part to, you know, on the mask, to get all of this to feel right. Sometimes even just by, once it's masked, something, you know, you can go in and sort of clone some of this other hair in where those edges, you know, where the mask didn't quite get it smooth out there a little bit. This one looks a little better up here. But
I like using the refine edge tool on any kind of like hair that's on the edge of the mask. The refine edge tool works really well.
Yeah, a lot of times. Well, and as we all know, Fred's working with an old version of Photoshop, but some of the, even inside Photoshop now, some of the new refine edge, they even have a function where you can just click on to ask it to do a better selection of hair, and a lot of times it'll just find it and make it better. Those things are some of the things that, again, using the AI part of Photoshop for selections and things that are just getting, say, better and better, but also easier and easier to accomplish. And so some of those things in the newer versions can really add to it. All right. I was anxious to hear about this one. I love the coast.
This picture was taken in Costa Rica, and of course the idea is that main branch is sharp and everything else is flowing.
Right.
And then, again, I'll say, because it's Fred, I'm going to assume that you played with some of the color gradations in the background. The blue, the warm.
I always tune up the colors a bit, but I didn't add or take away.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. I love that cool to warm effect in there. And was it a long exposure to get the softness of the... I was wondering.
I took the picture years ago. I don't really remember, but just visually looking at it, I would say so.
It says a 500th of a second here, though. If that's correct.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Very artistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your handling of the background adds a lot to the image, rather than it just feeling like it's a branch floating in a white background. I love this sort of, like I said, the cool tone to the warm tone, and the way this kind of water mixes in with the sand area. Very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
very nice.
Wow.
Another San Diego Zoo picture.
Wow. They're gonna.
The reflections are real.
Yeah.
Didn't add it or take away. I just recolored.
It's interesting that you say that, because they almost do feel like, you know, any of those programs where you can create reflections, because they tend to have that interesting kind of swirly effect. But really, I love what it did to the beak.
Yeah, the beak is amazing.
And the color that's there is really great. Any comments for Fred on this one?
I love it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love
Very
it too.
painter.
I was looking at the background thinking, well, that would be very difficult to have replaced.
Yeah. So, and Fred, was this, so again, because everything is in the original photograph, so this background really was just the water behind it? There was no plants or trees or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I did is change, you know, colors and tones.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. You could get a first place with this. Or at least a ribbon.
Yeah, we want you to keep judging because you're the best judge.
Yeah, well, I'll keep critiquing and doing workshops. I think that's the fun part.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe the clubs could do like 1 or 2 days a year, meetings a year, where it's just critiques and people send in their images,
Yeah,
not expecting kind of competition.
some of them are starting to do that, and I'll tell you a funny thing was, so I did that workshop recently for the photo naturalists, and then the black and white workshop, and then they asked me if I would. They were one of the ones who sent me an email this morning asking me to judge for them. They go, "Oh, we really enjoyed the workshop. Would you be willing to judge?" And I don't remember the guy's name, Dave. I don't know his last name. The guy who runs the group, I forget. And when I sent him back the email explaining to him why I'm not doing any more judging, he says, "I completely agree with you. I think judging is a kind of a weird thing that we do with art." And he says, when I took over the leadership of the group about 2 years ago, they were doing 10 competitions a year. And he said, I suggested that we drop it down to 5. And so he said for 1 year, they did just 5 competitions for that year. And he said at the end of that year, the rest of the board or the rest of the group voted against him and said, no, we want to go back to doing 10 a year. So it was like, yeah. So, and somebody had mentioned to me, go ahead, Fred.
I used to belong to a club in New York. They had 13 competitions.
Yeah, wow.
There was the monthly competition. Then they would take the 12 monthly winners and pick best of the year.
Yeah. And then some of the clubs even do a year end with most points. So like whatever points you've gathered, between the 6 and 9 or 6 and 10, whatever the values are, all those points get added up, and then they do a thing at the end of the year for who has the most points. But yeah, that somebody had said to me, they said, yeah, well, maybe this thing that you're doing will inspire these, camera clubs to maybe not do any competitions. I go, I have no illusions that that's going to happen. Not my goal at all. I already know that, clubs and a lot of them, this monthly competitions is a huge part of what they do. I'm not telling them not to do it. It's just my own personal diatribe, I guess, about how I feel about it. But yeah, I do not anticipate this even beginning to reorganize the way the clubs think, because I do know it's a huge part of what makes those clubs popular and why people love to attend them. I mean, I'm sure, like just listening to a few people tonight, there's a few people who are like, yeah, you know what, I don't enjoy that part of it, the competitive thing, but I do like getting feedback. And so that was always my favorite part about it, and the thing I mostly agreed with and why I liked doing them was all the clubs allowed you to do some sort of critique while you were doing the scoring. And I always felt like that's the most valued thing I think that the club members could get from this. But then at the year-end thing, only the board and a few people who are making the thing happen, usually they're the only ones there for the year-end judging, and so the members don't get to hear the comments that are being made or why you gave it a high score or a low score. So it kind of at the end takes away from it. We can beat that horse all night if you let me. Thanks you, Fred, for sharing your images.
Thank you, Fred. It was great work.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your comments.
Yeah. Miss Ann Collins. Guess where Ann was? This is not Irvine. This is not San Diego Harbor.
Tijuana.
So the 3 images that I brought tonight are all from one afternoon in 2 locations in Morro Bay.
Wow.
And each image is made up of 2 horizontal images stitched together.
Oh. So I'm just for grins, I'm going to pull them all 3 together here just to kind of show. Okay. The 4th one is a black and white, and actually I loved, when I first saw these, I loved seeing these 2 together because they're pretty much, like pretty close to the same perspective. And it's interesting how different they are. Beautiful. All right, let's start with this one. I love your decision on the panoramic crop. I think that works really well. And did you have any specific questions? Or a lot of times Anne sends in I'm having problems with this one with such and such a thing.
Yeah, not too much.
Okay.
I think mostly about crops on these that I did. In the last ones that I did the color in a black and white to see which one you prefer. But yeah, just overall comments. I mean, can I get more color out of this, do you think? I suppose. I liked this one for the warm light coming across onto the boat.
Yes. It was just all that warm light hitting the fronts of these boats are just beautiful. So the answer is yes, you can get more color. The better question is, should you? I don't know. I like it the way it is. Anybody else?
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Got lots of atmosphere. It's well composed.
Yeah.
The light's gorgeous.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm a sucker for too much color, but I in stuff like this, I like that it's not overdone.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I think, might have been on the Monday morning thing we were talking about one time, where somebody had asked about, is there a way to find the proper level of saturation? And I'm like, no, there's not. It's like really, it's to taste, right? I mean, some people like to add a lot of salt to their food and some people don't. But the comment that I had made before, in fact, there was somebody who used to come to our live Oceanside events years ago, that Mark Sanderson, who did a lot of Laguna Beach photographs. He lived up in Orange County, and boy, everything he brought had a lot of saturation in his images, and it was almost everybody's first response was like, "Wow, this is too saturated." And I said, I've tried to, I'm not always successful, I said, but I've tried to eliminate the word too from my critique, right? So what is too much, what is not enough? And, it's different. And I think, like what Josh just said, some of us do lean more towards more saturation. And I think sometimes it's a welcome break to see sometimes, just this, like, let's just let the subtle color be what it is, and not overdo it. And it's hard sometimes to have that restraint because more color always seems like it would be better, but not necessarily so.
Looking at it this way, seeing the really bright section going through the sky, maybe selected color, whites, and then changing that color a little bit, I don't know.
I was, when you were, just as you were saying that, I was just thinking is that, so if anything stands out, it would be that, so a bunch of ways of doing that. Again, you could do it with a luminosity mask. Sometimes I think, a quick, easy way to do it is just with the selective color, and then trying to pinpoint the white values, or sometimes even the neutral values. Making sure that the relative button is set to absolute, and then if we wanted to try to warm it up, I mean, typically I like to say I don't like it's not blown out. That's the one thing. But you can see is that this will really target those specific values. The question is how much do you want to add to it? And like I said, a lot of times I will lean towards the heavy side and then use the opacity to draw it back. So if I add a bunch of yellow, I probably also want to put in a little bit of magenta, so it's not just yellow. And it's not going to take a lot. I'm usually somewhere around that 1 to 3 sort of range. So again, somewhere between 5, 6. That's a little heavy. Again, it's an amazing how many, like that's a 7. There's 6, 5. So that's about 3, 5, 15. So then dropping down to because trying to get this ratio, any closer together sometimes is more difficult. So sometimes just dropping this opacity somewhere there, and then if we turn that off and on, it just does really, it drops down that sort of intensity a little bit. So I might be in favor of that.
Okay.
So let's see if we go back here. There's the JPEG. There's the Photoshop one. It's subtle change, but again, we'll nitpick over the image because it's good. The other thing you have to be careful of with this technique too is if there's other whites in the image, and I didn't turn it off and on and look everywhere else, but you may want to apply a mask so that it only affects this area up here and maybe not this down here, but it doesn't appear to be like it's overly strong anywhere else in the image. Beautiful. And again, I think the contrast between these two is really interesting to see.
And I did get rained on.
Well, that's part of the game, isn't it? That's part of the job description.
And if you zoom in on the center boat, you'll see the Pelican Parade.
Oh, right there. Yeah, yeah. Funny. And then the one lone bird over here.
Yeah.
All right. Comments here for Ann? I like this little bit of blue that's in here. I don't know. I might, again, until you do it, I don't know. I think kind of like what I was saying in Fred's twig image, sometimes having that warm and cool, where this has some of that cool and warmth in the water also, sometimes exaggerating that balance can be good. So like maybe with a hue saturation, and if we like say target blues, you're always wondering is it blue or is it cyan. Here it says cyan. So, and I'll also usually use the dropper here to target a specific tone in the image, and I might do this again separately. So if I'll do one adjustment layer, because I could easily go in and do the warms separately too, but if I want to play with the opacity, then I have to affect them each differently. So I could use this one for the cyan, drop another one in, target these warmer tones, so let's say somewhere in there becomes the yellows. I always grab that dropper, and you'll see when I go to click on that warm tone, if you watch this section of the histogram, or not histogram, of the color bar, you might see it shift to a specific tone. See where this is more of a orange, and there's not an orange drop down menu. So you, by doing this dropper here and targeting a specific tone, you're in the right menu. You're on yellows by hitting the first jump or the first selection, but that second one helps get you into a specific range on the color bar here. And then now if we take this up just a little bit, again, not going to take a lot, and so now if I take those two and turn them off, again the color's pretty subtle. So this is really, and that's really all the tones that are in there are warm and cool tones. So I would want to, so again I would, so we'll call this cool, and then this one warm, and then I could play with the opacity. So if the blue is a little strong, and yeah, an argument could be made to go, why don't we just drop in a hue saturation, and just, since there's only two colors in the image, let's just bump them both up at the same time. But I think sometimes having that separate control could be a plus. So in this case, it might be enough, but I do like a little bit more color in this one way or the other. Kind of favor having the separate controls. All right, anybody else? Any comments? Let's see what happens on the cool.
Maybe even a vibrance.
Yeah. That gets to be a little more.
Did you have lunch in the restaurant that you're standing next to?
And I was out at the fishing dock area, launch
Yeah,
pad.
on the dock there's a great seafood restaurant.
Oh, really? Oh, I
Best
saw.
breakfast in Northern California is at Dorn's
Thorns.
in town.
Wow.
Dorn's.
Dorns.
D-O-R-N-S.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
D-O-R-N-S.
Wow.
Great food. Been there forever. Warren Dorn was a supervisor in the county of Los Angeles for like 30 years. Or that
This is
family.
at the southernmost end of the main roads along the harbor.
So here I added a selective color layer, went to the cyans, and then using the black adjustment just to darken that part of the sky, the blue. So all three of those. The warm is subtle, but I think it works. Comments from anybody else? I mean, these are all very subtle changes.
Nicely done.
Yeah. Okay, and then this last one, color and black and white. So tell us about this band.
Not much to tell, just stitched together, and I've warmed up the beach a little bit and cooled the rest a little bit.
I think it's interesting in the black and white one, again, all the details seem to come out a little bit stronger, which is, I think, interesting.
Yeah.
It has more structure because I did put it through a silver effect.
So what I did was I loaded both into, so hopefully they line up, they do. So I loaded them both into Photoshop together as layers and put the black and white one on top of the color one. So an interesting technique, and in fact, it was in the black and white class, somebody that I did for the Photo Naturalist group, somebody had sent me an email and said about this idea of having because I don't have the black and white adjustment layers here, but having the black and white image and then using it to kind of help control the color and contrast of the color image. And I'd said, yeah, I've used the technique before where you can take the color adjustment layer, or the black and white adjustment layer, adjust it to get the black and white tones that you want, and then turn the black and white layer from normal, the black and white filter layer, turn it from normal to luminosity, and then that black and white filter then allows the color to come back through because you're in a luminosity mode. This guy's suggestion was, and it was interesting, I thought maybe that they would look identical, but his comment was to create that composite layer on top and then turn this layer into a luminosity adjustment layer. And the effect is different than using the turning the black and white layer, and especially if you have curves and other adjustment layers as part of the conversion to black and white. So now if you look at the difference between these two images, you're getting the benefits of the black and white, right? And then you could always dial this effect down a little bit too. So just another variation on, but I like what it does to the rock. It gives more dimension between the rock and the background, which was kind of what I liked about the black and white image in normal mode, is that rock had, like you said, you had a little more structure to it, but even the difference between those tones in the background, and probably because there's enough blue back there and this is warmer, that you're able to adjust those tones on the black and white image. But I think that's an interesting, I like this idea.
This is very cool.
Yeah. Rather,
so you're just layering the two and changing the color image to luminosity in the black.
No, the black and white one to luminosity.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that it brings all the color back, and this is controlling the brightness of the image. And like I said, I've done it a lot of times with the black and white adjustment layer, but I've never done it by creating a composite and then throwing it over the top, which, like I said, definitely has totally different results. It also puts more contrast on the beach based on the black and white image also. Yeah, pretty cool.
That is really
I
wild.
might drop that back a notch. Stephen Burns does a thing on color processing, and the suggestion is to, you know, process as a black and white image, because you'll see the contrast and textures and tones better than when you're seeing all the color. And then the idea is to then, you know, put all the color back in after you've done the processing in black and white. And I've seen where he's actually done it inside of, you know, Lightroom or Camera Raw, where you actually do the initial processing to your raw file with the color stripped away, so that you're just doing it as black and white and then turn it back on.
Does this crop work for you?
It does for me. I like it.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anybody else disagree? Oops, I didn't want to close it. It's going to go to my come down a notch. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody, any comments on the cropping or?
No, I like the crop.
Yeah.
I love panoramas.
Yeah.
I like all three of these images.
Yeah, I agree. All three are good.
That's a cool technique with the luminosity
Yeah.
layer.
So now you have
I'm gonna have to try
three
that.
options. One, let's see, so we'll go black and white, color, and then color with the black and white.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. All right.
Great.
So much more detail in the rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did work it more
Right.
in black and white version, because I even made, you know, did like a selection of it and worked on it. So I probably should have done that to the color version to start with.
Yeah, that's what struck me the most was the difference between the two of them. One was I also liked the sky was a little more prominent too, but all of a sudden, in this black and white image, there's a much better depth of space. You know, even from the foreground of the sand in the black and white one to the rock, to the background, to the clouds. It really worked well.
You know what really made the difference was the film panel in Silver Effects, because I changed it from the normal to, I don't know if it was the red or the yellow or the green, one of those other ones, and it really separated out.
Oh, using the
background
filter
from the
inside
rock.
Silver Effects, where you could just pick a red, green, blue filter. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I don't know if I've said it here before, but it's like I have a bunch of undoing that I need to do for Silver Effects, because I've poo-pooed it for so many years, because DxO had ruined the ability to take older smart objects processed, you know, even with color effects, but all of their filters, when they upgraded the last couple of versions ago, your older smart filters that you had used with those with the NIC filters, your older smart objects with smart filters would not function with the newer upgrade. And even when I had asked them about it, they said, yeah, that's correct. And I go, are you going to fix it? No plans to fix it. And then as I was preparing to do that black and white class for the photo naturalist, I thought, well, at least I'm going to need to be able to talk about this. So I went in and tried to pull up an old image and cleaned up a bunch of problems that I was having with the Silver Effects. And I ran the an old version that I had processed, an old image that I had processed in the older version. I ran it through the newer version of Silver Effects, and it went in and it came back out just fine. And I'm like, hey, they fixed it, but they didn't make a big deal out of it. They never notified. I never saw any announcement. Somebody said they did see it, that it was showed it in the latest upgrade, that the smart object compatibility had been repaired. So yeah, now I feel like I got a bunch of backpedaling I have to do and say, no, it works again, don't worry about it. But in the meantime, I started working on other ways to do black and white processing. All right, and Josh, you haven't shown images before, or have you?
Yeah, I've attended. This is my third,
Oh, okay.
and I submitted for the The one AI and the one.
Okay. Well, that's right. You're the one that had the Martian in the hot air balloon. Is that right? Yeah.
Alien baby in the hot air balloon.
That was great. Yeah. All right. All right. So I always laugh because I go, people will come to the meeting, for 10 times, and I'll still be going, so this is the first time you've been and the first time you showed images, right? It's like, yeah, no, I've been here for a year now. All right. So tell us about this one, Josh.
So last time I submitted one, which is a moonset and some pelicans and a wave coming in down in La Jolla. And this shot is literally me turning 180 degrees for the sunrise.
Wow.
Almost same location, probably 10 feet away, just at a different part of the railing there. Yeah, same morning. This was back in January 6th. We had a really big swell that came through.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I love that water coming over the edge of that point. This is great.
Yeah, so that's my main subject here, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Comments from anybody? Everybody's gotten quiet tonight.
I love that water coming down. Where is it coming from? Or is it a splash zone?
It's a wave, so the waves were splashing up there, so that's all the water just filtering back down after a wave.
Yeah, from a big wave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this
Really
is this
nice.
near Sunset Cliffs or?
That is right down in La Jolla,
Oh,
right
La
at
Jolla, you said, yeah, right.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh, Goldfish Point.
Goldfish Point. Wow.
Yeah, so it's just north of the Cove and south of La Jolla Shores.
Yeah.
Where the pelicans hang out, where all the pelican photographers in the world go.
Now we know.
January.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It is spectacular for pelicans and for the sea lions as well.
I think the comment that we made before maybe holds true on this one too. I was going to look at it in Photoshop. It looks like there's a little bit of again some color noise in the fact that there's sort of some red, green, blue splotchy areas in here that a lot of times are taken care of by, and again, I could go into topaz, but even from here, just to try it, I'll just make that a smart object. If even if I just went back into Camera Raw, and again, these are always different working on a JPEG versus an original file. But so going into the optics, and oops, where am I at here? And that's the other thing too. Now that it has, there's the new noise reduction, that is inside of Camera Raw and Lightroom. So let's see how much difference there.
Yeah, this hasn't seen that. This I processed back in January, so I haven't gone back to reprocess this with the improved.
Yeah, I think it does remove some of that. It's funny because sometimes when we think of noise, we're thinking of real specific, like grain that's either color or black and white. But, many times it can be that sort of just color. Like in there, you see a lot of that magenta, green, blue, and just that little bit takes it away. And again, this is on a JPEG. If you had the original 16-bit file, it would probably do even a better job. But God, the colors in this is just amazing. I love the sky. And did you do any kind of what sort of processing did you do for this image?
So everything I do starts in Bridge to Adobe Camera Raw to Photoshop.
Okay.
And I would say most of my work on this is in Adobe Camera Raw. And I did a little bit of cleanup. I removed some birds. There were a lot more birds. Well, not a lot more birds. There were some distracting birds that I removed. I removed some of the foreground. There was more of the plants in the foreground that were just more distracting, and especially in front of this water zone that I wanted to keep clearer. And actually, interestingly, that I had a better sort of one. I like the angle better, but not the colors or birds or other elements of the picture. So obviously, it's always a compromise, and you've only got a few minutes to pick your compositions when the light is like it is. So yeah, so I decided to just clean up in front a little bit as much as I could.
Yeah, what did you use to clean up with? Did you just use content aware, or what tool?
I mostly use clone and healing. Again, this is back in January, so before any of the generative fill, I might go back in. I was looking at the raw picture again. I think generative fill, it really is just cleaning up the bushes that I almost cropped out, and I think I did crop out some. They're not a lot of the story there. So
yeah, I was wondering. So again, one of the new tools that's been in regular Photoshop now for a little while is that removal tool, and again, it's AI. So basically, coming in and trying, because what seems like would be sometimes really a huge effort to get rid of this stuff using cloning and all that. Sometimes, again, this does such a great job. Again, mine's running really slow because we're online and I'm using them. I'm recording and doing all that stuff, but in fact, it's not moving at all. So there it goes. But so if I even just doing that little bit, it's amazing that it'll find and put in all that detail. And the cool part about it is that it's not, it's not content aware fill. I even thought about when I first saw this, about my first thought was that, gee, this foreground information stuff is a little bit distracting. But I don't know. There's something also interesting, and I was gonna ask you if did you use any minus clarity, because there seems to be a little bit of a glow to the image that which is there's a mood there, and I think that sometimes this kind of stuff that that is in the foreground could also kind of adds to that mood, a little more mystery than everything being perfect. And maybe I'm just making excuses, but I think that once I looked at it, I was thinking about, so again, I think what you said initially about removing some of the stuff from the most interesting part of the image where that water is a big help, right? So and again, what other, you could go crazy with this and see how far you could go, but I think that still that point of trying to get maybe that area around this cleaned up, even more, because it would be so pretty simple to do with this new tool. And that's I hear people a lot, they'll say something like, oh yeah, I go through my files at the end of every year and I start throwing away things that I know I'm not going to use because I shot this thing of this really cool wave, but there's so much junk in the foreground, and then all of a sudden, here's this new tool that you'd be able to get rid of this stuff. I am hard pressed to throw anything out because it could.
I'm actually probably the worst offender there. I tend to come back, make my keeper selections, and everything else goes. Yeah. But,
so just that little bit, right? That's and it's how difficult is that? The best thing about this is I don't have to have a ton of technique to pull this off. It's really just try it, and crap, if it works, you're done. But I definitely think that would be kind of worth doing, because I think that definitely that splash on this rock is really the focus, obviously.
And were you just using the new remove tool there?
Yeah, just the new remove. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing you can do too, because it works also, I was gonna say equally as well, is you can still use the remove tool on a blank layer. You just have to make sure that you come up and check the sample all layers, and then basically it will do the same thing. You end up on a separate layer, but I don't know if there's any advantage or disadvantage other than the fact that it's less pixel information. You don't have to have a complete duplicate layer. And I love in this image, I think, you were saying that you had removed a few of the birds. I love the idea that there's so many birds flying around in here. And I think this haze that comes in over the back of this point is also really a beautiful part of it. I had wondered, and I was going to ask everybody too, about these trees that are here. Is that a positive or a negative of it being there? Everybody fell asleep. Nobody has an opinion.
I think it's better without the trees.
Okay, let's
because
see.
you just don't have enough of the tree.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Is it like, if there was more, would it be better? Or yeah.
Less is
And also, I think without even before it takes it away, yeah, I think this idea, the expanse of the sky now, it kind of just goes from edge to edge. There's nothing really obscuring it.
Yeah.
That does look nice, though.
Not like that.
Really.
I'd be tempted to take a couple of those birds out that go dark against that peninsula. Not those guys.
One dot there.
Yeah.
That one dot just above the hillside.
Yeah, right in there.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
This one here?
The one you just had your... No, up against the peninsula. Against the long peninsula.
In the dark area? Is it under here now? Oh,
yeah.
Oops, I didn't want to do that.
No. Oh,
There's
no.
actually a cancel button that finally works.
No, I'm talking about go to the left there, Larry.
Go to the left out in here?
Yeah, and then, up against that point. Not the point in the foreground, but the background peninsula that's going on with all the homes and everything.
These back in here?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that guy. Now get rid of the 2 or 3 to the left. It kind of disappeared to the left. Your other left.
This
There
is
you
my
go.
left.
No, again up against that land part.
These here?
No.
Nope.
Keep going up.
Going up. These in here?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I can't tell what
one?
that is.
Well, it looked like a bird to me.
Well, and sometimes I wonder, I've said this to people before, is like, sometimes when a bird gets so small that it starts to become, a distraction more than it is a bird. So sometimes it's worth getting rid of these little small ones sometimes that can be distractions.
That's what I was thinking.
Or start copying new ones, take them from here and put them over here. Anyhow, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that retouching, you could just keep going and going and going, but some of the stuff I took out.
Started with a pretty good capture, and I like a lot of the work that's been done here.
Yeah.
I think if you, Josh, could go back and work on some of that color noise, I think this could be a really
I agree.
strong, really super image.
Thank you. I'm taking notes.
A lot easier than going back and weed whacking this side of the hill.
Yeah.
So let's save that. Oops, I didn't see where that was going. I went to the right place. All right, and this next one down. Where is this?
That's out at Lake Cuyamaca.
Oh.
And so this was a group, photo group that went out there for some astro, obviously. And this guy, I just call this the astro photographer, set up with his lights on the bridge where it was sort of a obvious shot with the Milky Way lined up behind the bridge. So I just made him my subject.
Yeah. And because he is noticeable, and it's interesting too, because you don't need much more definition to make out the idea this is a guy with a tripod, right?
Yeah, I remember I went in because that's about a 30-second, 25 or 30-second picture.
Yeah.
So I just lucked out that he was standing fairly still looking through his camera. But he was a little blurred. I remember I went in and I think I cleaned up just a tiny bit to make it him a little less blurry, but there's only so many pixels there.
Right. Yeah, and since you're drawn here, I would definitely take out the telephone line that runs through the back end there.
Yeah, I've debated that because it's I could take that out, and then I don't know, maybe I could take the pole out because it does lead to the telephone pole right about mid.
Right.
I agree now, and especially now with the tools, I think I even debated that.
Yeah, it'd be really pretty simple to do for sure. The one thing, and I always, it seems like I make the comment frequently, is that on night sky images, I always feel like that sort of depth of the sky is much improved if you take this sort of far farthest reach, the darkest tones that are in the sky, and bring them closer to a black value. So it adds a lot more depth. The stars really come out of the image. And so and I'm trying to remember it. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, so I just did a curve adjustment, and I think I just used the black dropper and clicked out on this very far edge here, and then again dialed back the opacity, so I'm at like 72%, and then and I did a sky selection so that it only affected the sky, but that same trick then of dialing back the strength on the density of that mask, so this is down to about 48%. So I'm still, because you'll see if I put this back to 100%, and when the sky was that dark, it felt like this is now too bright, which is, I think, sometimes another problem that a lot of people tend to brighten up, foregrounds too much. I mean, I think this is an interesting part of the image, but the sky is really kind of the star of the image. So again, by dropping the density on that mask, there's plenty of detail in here, and I love that warm and the green that's all happening in the image down in here. So I think having at least a little bit of that darkening effect on the foreground, but allowing it to happen in the sky more, really helps bring out that tone. And I'm not sure, I mean, this is real common too, that sort of yellowish green tone that happens from, city light pollution and all that. I don't know if I would try to tone it down, the color. I don't know. Any comments about that from anybody?
I think bluer would be nicer.
Yeah.
Than the yellow green.
So let's see what color it's going to come up as yellow.
Milky Way a lot. Really nice.
Yeah.
The bridge looks kind of slanty as far as the pilings go.
I see. Yeah. And again, you'd want to do this mask so that it only affects the sky, but also I'm going to see. So again, if I look at the color bar down here and I move the hue, that's going to shift it more towards green. Coming the other way adds red, and then hopefully eventually we get to the blue. And if you wanted that blue tone, almost always I've just found whenever you shift the hue, it goes way over the top color wise, so you almost always have to bring back the saturation a little bit too. And this is a little more purple than blue. Let's see if we go all the way to the other side here. It still wants to get kind of caught in the blues, or in the purples. That's a little more bluish. I don't know. I think actually I think I just like it better just desaturated. So again, if I target this tone, it's going to come up in the yellows, but then grabbing this dropper, it'll shift that bar, and then just dropping the saturation of that tone.
Yeah. Like
and then going with the black mask, so these tones all stay. Brush with a black, and I'm at 50%, and on a soft brush, and then just sort of, oops, I need white. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have to get rid of it completely, but boy, yeah, the colors in the, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Huh.
Beautiful picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great job, Josh.
Thank you.
Yeah. But see how that darker sky, the stars just really come out then. And that's not even really playing around with much other than finding a black point somewhere in there.
Yeah. Like that. Thank you.
Wow.
All right, my attempt at nature. So the thing I like about this picture is it's really hard to see, but if you zoom all the way into the eye and the black slit in the middle, you can see me in there.
Oh.
And I think if I process it a little bit differently, I can accentuate that, though I don't expect anyone else to actually notice that. But if you look closely, you can sort of see my head and the lens, you know, the camera.
Great.
So this was on my favorite, what has become really one of my favorite haunts locally is Flint Coat Trail in Torrey Pines Reserve. It's I almost hate saying it out loud because it's my secret spot. So Torrey Pines gets so crowded on the west side, everybody hikes the west side. Almost nobody knows about Flint Coat Trail that goes from the coast. You can cross the street. There's actually a trailhead there, and you can all walk all the way to Sereno Valley.
Wow.
The back side of the mesa there, the ridge. So anyway, there's lots of stuff back there. There's almost any wildlife you might see in San Diego you could potentially see in there. There's water that runs through there, which is why there's so much wildlife in there. It's great for birding. It's great for coyotes and deer and just everything.
All right, any comments here for Josh?
I hope you had a long lens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 100-500. But I'm pretty close. But he was, you know, he had obviously just eaten. He was stretched across the trail. And I had plenty of room to work, kind of. And so, and he literally, the whole time I was shooting, he did not move. Just stretched out in the sun. Across the trail.
So, I love I mean, again, the sort of the depth of field is like perfect, right? Because you're really drawn even just right to the face, the eye. I don't even mind the idea that this back area drops off. I love that the background drops off in focus. But there are, I mean, for me, a few of these out of focus areas that are a little distracting again. So there's just some quick retouch. The other thing that I like to do too, like almost always, you know, like what is the main subject again, you know, kind of like your rock with the water on it. This is obviously about the snake. And so by removing some of the color from the background too, and sort of doing again, I made just, I'll just open it, made a selection of the snake and then just treating the background separate from the snake itself. So you end up with a lot of things here that, you know, you have control over. So again, and actually I brought out even a little more detail in the eye with this curve adjustment, which is really just again a selection and then set to this linear dodge and then opacity of like 57%, just playing with how strong. So just using a blend mode, I didn't change the curve at all, but at 100% it's just too intense. So you're always trying to figure out how much of that you can put in.
Right.
And then the hue saturation of the background is just with the snake. And then there's a separate curve adjustment where I darkened it just a tiny bit, not a lot. And then reversed the mask and brought up a little more saturation on the snake itself. So the warmer tones in here stand out a little bit more and the background drops off. This might be a little too dark. I would play with it some more. But the rest of all the retouching in the foreground was all done with generative fill here, just one at a time. I mean, this is this sort of highlight off the back of his neck here, right there. This is that foreground corner. This is the big twig in the foreground, the right-hand twig. And and there was this weird kind of bright spot on the snake. So again, just for grins, you kind of go, so what would generative fill do? And it's like, bam, it just fills it in with more of the right detail.
I actually did a fair amount of cleanup on this and actually darkened the background already some. Usually just pick a dark tone and I just lay it down in the background. But I also had, and I feel like go back and check, I had like two. They looked like, I couldn't tell if they were red pixels from my camera or if they were actually just color from the snake, which could be, you know, it was just bothersome to look at, right? Yeah. This is always the question, right? Like an actual color on the snake, it just happened to be a tiny spot that was a deeper red. and there were two of them, and though I cleaned those up, I always debate a little bit.
Yeah, no, I always figure, like, again, it can be real, but it could also be real distracting. So it's like, yeah, sometimes it's worth getting rid of it. But it's
yeah, another shot of this snake head on that I actually like this one better, but I don't know if the other one's maybe more dramatic.
So there's sort of the before and then the after with those layers. I did one. Oh, I think actually there was a background or on this layer here. Some of that I just did with content aware fill because it seemed to work fine. But yeah, just because generative fill works so great doesn't mean that the other tool's useless. So
yeah.
And then I did do in fact, I didn't have it on when I first opened it up, but I did do that high pass contrast and with the mask, just, so it's only on the snake itself. And it just adds a little, it also usually, not only will it add the contrast, but it also adds a little bit of sharpening too, because that's the nature also of the high pass filter set to overlay mode. But again, this was that action. So I always offer, if anybody is interested in these the high pass contrast actions, just send me an email and I'll mail them to you and you can plug them in and try them out. All right, any other comments for Josh here? Yeah, Fred.
Yes. First I want to tell you I really like the picture. I don't want you to feel like I'm just going to tear it apart, but I just want a radical change to it, that the background is still very distracting for me. I love the snake. Now, what if we use our snake mask and severely darken and slightly blur and reduce contrast, all three of those things?
Yeah, okay. So there's so again, this, I was just changing this blend mode, but also, so if I just take this, let me duplicate that layer here. And sometimes also by changing this blend mode to luminosity, and then like Fred's saying, so if you just kind of carry this to an extreme, I'm getting a little posterized sense here. I think it's going to feel like it's floating at some point. So I don't know. I mean, there's something about this.
Well, that's a bit too extreme,
right?
But I also would like to take out some of the contrast and perhaps even a little blur.
Okay. So there's
or a glow.
We've so there is a great tool here. So let's go back down to here. So let me turn off that just so we can do the blur first. So if we take this background layer and I'm going to want to put this mask onto it. And then, so the reason for doing this is if we go into filter, blur, and use lens blur, and the reason, oops, I do this every time. It's going to blur the mask. I want to blur the image. So the reason for using the lens blur is because it's the one that allows you to use a mask on the blur. And so, and you would find it here under source. And so the source is going to be the layer mask. And then obviously it's backwards, so we want to invert it so that it's going to affect the background. And by using this source layer mask here, you won't get that halo glowing around the snake, where when you blur it normally you would get a halo there. So this is one of the few blurs that will allow you to apply that layer mask to it. And then you can, increase the amount of blur, which I think would help it. The question is, and if I just say let's choose that amount there, or do you think you want to do more than that, Fred? I don't know how bad.
No, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing we can do though, so I'll say okay, the one thing we can do, and because I have the I should have done a composite layer with that. But the one thing we can do too is when you do that blur, is the same idea as if I put this into a group. So this is on the Kuiper panel, a shortcut. If I put that into a group and then grab a gradient. Then I could use a black to white gradient to, and actually want to switch it. So I'd mentioned this before. I love this whole new gradient function where we can actually do everything kind of live, and play with this gradient. So if again, you still want to have some depth so that this background is more blurred than the foreground. And there's other blur techniques we could use for that too. But if I double click on the black here, I can do sort of this live update. As I put this closer to white, I'm going to get back to that 100% blur, other than the things that I didn't include because those are the generative fill ones. But I could use this gradient to control how much of the foreground gets blurred to the background. And the cool thing about again, on the gradient, I would be able to re-edit it if I wanted to. So, but again, I should have done it as a composite layer. Then if I went back in and now darkened this background, I should have marked which one I'm doing. So then on this one here, playing with this, and you could do the same thing on this light to dark adjustment. I'm not sure how dark I'd want that, but again, you can do the same thing, put it into a group and grab a gradient and do the same thing here, where you can kind of control that sort of light to dark function.
Yeah, I think it's more dramatic now.
If I had composited that foreground. And I think I would maybe even still go back into the hue saturation layer of the background here. Yeah, and maybe even still drop that saturation on the background a little bit more. Because when you start to blur it and it starts to glow, and that warm tone can sometimes be distracting. It's amazing how much it can handle. I mean, see how orange that is. I wouldn't want it to be black and white, but and almost the same idea too is even on this gradient, you could do the same thing, put it into a group and grab the gradient tool and actually what we'd want to do, let me think about this. So yeah, so same thing as we could leave some of the color, more color in the foreground, let the background drop off even more. Again, if I wish I had included that in the beginning, but I don't want to start over. So let's go. Let's see the before and after from here. Yeah. The only thing is this starts to feel like it's floating, so I would still play around with that, how much blur I'd want.
One thing I do like about the original, I like cleanup and I like the simplifying and making the snake pop a little bit, but one thing I do like is it shows how amazingly well suited for the environment. I mean, the fact that it's hard
right, the camouflage nature almost.
Yeah, exactly. How well they really fit into their environment.
Yeah, it's like we've destroyed its whole camouflage ability.
Yes, exactly.
Now you're real easy to spot. It's funny, like same thing. Like you sometimes just see like lion or tiger images. You know, it's like where they've got this whole camouflage built in, and then it's like, yeah, but it makes for a bad photograph. So it's like, let's make them stand out more. All right. Well, that's a lot to chew on here, I guess. All right. Well, all right. I think that's all the images that I received. Did we not get to somebody? Or I think that's everybody who sent me something, I hope. Get back here and just say thanks everybody for coming tonight, and thanks for everybody who shared their images. Like I mentioned, if you're interested and you want to do a little more stuff with AI, September 28th, the last Thursday of the month, is that DPX group. It's on a separate meetup page, so if you wanted to go there, and you can just search my name and DPX AI, it'll come up. sign up for the meeting, and again, send in some images if you're already working with some other AI functions. It's a pretty diverse group. I mean, we have some people that are doing some really way out AI stuff, and then some people that are trying to do a more realistic approach. So it can be a lot of fun. All right, thanks everybody. We will see you online somewhere sometime.